On.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And we're going to be talking about the Libertarian Party or the various libertarian parties around the United States. Now, to some passersby, this might seem like a little bit of infighting among free market people or in the middle of the so-called liberty movement. Is that what this is? We'll find out. Please welcome a guy who, who is this guy? He's from Greece. He's worked in England. Why? We don't go over there and talk to them about their political parties. What's he doing over here lecturing us? Because he knows what he's talking about is why. It's Nikos Rucka.
Hi, Rucka. Hi, everyone. So let's jump into the topic. So why was the Libertarian Party in the trending on Twitter and all that stuff lately? Because there were two tweets by the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which is a branch of the Libertarian Party, which are the following one. The first showed Meghan McCain, the daughter of the former well-known neocon John McCain. So it's a very uncomfortable photo. Meghan McCain is crying over the dead
coffin,
the coffin of John McCain, and the caption is "Happy Holidays." So you get it. The idea was that a warmonger died, and this is something that we should be happy about. And on the 25th of August, same day, when the discussion was about the minimum wage, that they tweeted $6 million minimum wage, or you're anti-Semitic. Now, if you didn't get the quote joke, 6 million people, this is the many people say that this is anti-Semitic because it kind of jokes with the idea that 6 million people died, whereas not really 6 million people died, would say a Holocaust denier or however you want to call it. So this is somehow a joke, or I don't get it, but the spirit is that we're gonna create here some noise, and we're gonna be the bad boys. Now, even people within the Libertarian Party said that this is of bad taste, but usually it came accompanied with a but. This is of bad taste, but it's even worse to be a war criminal or a warmonger like McCain, or if you spend too much time pointing the finger to the Libertarian Party, you are with the regime and you are part with the problem. So I have two explanations for why the Libertarian Party is doing this. Of course, we need to mention that recently the party was taken over by the Mises Caucus. And think about it this way: the Libertarian Party used to be closer to what we'd consider left libertarianism, or what they call thick libertarianism, whereas now it's people who say, no, to be a libertarian, you have to give up on the whole agenda, because on the whole woke agenda, because this is the agenda of the regime, and you have to be also anti-regime, which means anti the US government and project that it's involved, like the vaccines, like the culture wars, like military interventions abroad. So, Rucka, what's your first thoughts? And then I'll tell you my first thoughts.
Well, I've got a question. What is the Mises Caucus, and what do you mean they took over? Because I've heard this, but I don't know what it means.
That's very important. So the Mises Caucus are people who are close to figures from the Mises Institute, close to the comedian Dave Smith, and they're mostly people who are close to what we'd call Paleo libertarians. So they're very big supporters of Ron Paul. You'll see them often retweeting Lew Rockwell, and you will see them having the same agenda as Paleo libertarians. What is the agenda of Paleo libertarians? That the number one enemy and the number one enemy of freedom is foreign intervention, is the so-called warfare state, not the welfare state, the warfare state. And they also believe that freedom is compatible with more conservative views on life. Some people say they are quite tolerant to to people with bad views when it comes to the South. They've been accused of, quote, neo-Confederates. They have their defense on the neo-Confederate side. But we could do a whole discussion about Paleo-conservatives. So what counts for this episode is that this wing, let's say, of the libertarian movement, in the recent convention of the Libertarian Party, they took over all the key positions. And one of the most important positions that they took over is the one of how it's called, what would be in the Communist Party, the General Secretary. So that's not the title in the Libertarian Party, but this position went to Angela McArdle, who is close to these people that I have discussed. So they took over the convention and also the social media of the Libertarian Party. And they do what we call quite often shit posting. They post memes. Some of them are very edgy. Some are very of really, really bad taste, in my view, like the one with Meghan McCain. Some are even worse. So, for example, a lot of tweets being very, very mocking when it comes to the United States support for Ukraine. The usual stuff that, okay, you support Ukraine, but what about Palestine? What about other, you talk about Russian imperialism, what about the Israeli imperialism? And all that stuff, which we will discuss. But is it clear what it means that they've taken over the party?
I think so.
And also, their usual reply to people who say, what's this? What is happening to the Libertarian Party? They say, oh, you didn't get the memo? Now this is a party that really stands for liberty. Therefore, forget what you knew about Gary Johnson and all these losers that were hosted in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, so I mean, you can tell how people view the United States and how much respect they have in certain arenas. So like when it comes to like the January 6th, whether you call it an insurrection or not, the way people's attitude towards it, I think reflects how they look at the United States itself. So if you see the United States as a remarkable achievement in history that, you know, if we lose this, like good luck getting this back anytime soon, you know, a system with checks and balances that is designed to, with as little error as possible, protect the rights of the individual. Of course, January 6th was a horrific scene of just disrespect, if nothing else, just people completely making a disgrace and vandalizing the Capitol. However, if you're an anarchist or if you're kind of a libertarian with anarchist sort of premises, anarchist tendencies, then of course to you January 6th was hilarious and just a lot of fun. And and so what if they end up burning down the whole Capitol? Hey, so what? All they were doing in that building was passing bad laws anyway, burn the whole system. It can't possibly get any worse than this, they think. So it's definitely on just the issue of, oh, they're only joking. I mean, at a certain point, if you're using a political party to post jokes where it's not clear to everyone if you're joking or not, I think look, pick one. Do you want to be a comedian? Or do you want to be a satirist, or do you want to actually be involved in politics? When it's not clear to people when you're joking, when you're being serious, it becomes clear your goal is chaos. Your goal is to just disrupt with no positive end vision that anyone can discern. As far as the content of those tweets, if somebody sees, the United States foreign policy, or going to war as akin to, Hitler invading Poland, I would say they've made some serious mistakes to get to that conclusion. But once they have that opinion, then mock John McCain and his family, because if John McCain is Hitler, then, then I'm not, my jaw doesn't drop that they would say that. I think they've made some serious mistakes to get to that conclusion, to compare the United States to, an imperialist, dictatorship, etc. But when it comes to the $6 million minimum wage, or you're anti-Semitic, there's dog whistling, and then there's this. This is just unbelievably, shocking. I mean, I'm not easily shocked, but when you told me about that tweet, I had to Google it just to see it with my own eyes. Again, to have a political party with any level of prominence tweet out something like that. Yeah, they might say, oh, we were joking around. It's just a couple of guys with access to this Twitter account that we thought this would be a clever way to say something. I mean, it's a very creepy way to kind of allude to the fact that a lot of like socialists or progressives are, of Jewish heritage or something, or that there's this weird, they're promoting this view that like the socialists and the Jews are in on something. I mean, and of course, like you mentioned, like they're sort of kind of tongue in cheek saying like you need to embrace 6 million, like you need to embrace the number 6 million, or you're doing something wrong. Very creepy, very weird. I would want nothing to do with whoever tweeted that, and I would want nothing to do with a party that would tweet that out. These people are not fighting for liberty. They seem primarily motivated by what they hate, and what they hate is not even something I would agree with all of the time. They're very creepy. Like you said, they tend to be more comfortable with the Confederacy, more comfortable with actual dictators around the world than you would assume. It's just the fact that anarchists tend to apologize for the Confederacy it tells you everything you need to know. The people who say, give me liberty, right? No any government is too much government, that they would take the side of the pro-slavery government in the 19th century tells you all you need to know.
So let's try to find more evidence in these accusations that we're throwing. So my overall point is that everything wrong with the Libertarian Party comes with their moral subjectivism. What does the moral subjectivism mean? It means that I believe that the Libertarian would say, I believe that libertarianism is only about politics. We all agree here on the non-aggression principle. Beyond politics, anything goes. So we all agree, supposedly, that you shouldn't initiate force. And this is a big umbrella that beyond that, anything goes. But notice that without a proper moral understanding of what freedom is and why you need it, you are going to end up in these blunders. And actually, blunder is quite sympathetic way to put it, that the Libertarian Party is falling. Listen this as an example of moral subjectivism. So someone mentioned to Angela McArdle, and again, I want to give you her exact title because it's not general secretary. She's the chair of the Libertarian National Committee. So someone points to her that, hey, what is this? Isn't this a horrible tweet? The one about McCain. And here's her answer. Actually, I'd like to see how the residents of New Hampshire view it before deciding if it is or isn't good. New Hampshire is wild. They're very different from the rest of the country. Now, remember, this was a tweet by the New Hampshire branch of the Libertarian Party. So her answer is, well, I cannot judge. I mean, if the people in New Hampshire like it, then it's okay. If they don't like it, well, then it's not okay. And you could say this is one example. Listen to these other tweets by people affiliated with the party or retweeted by the main party account. Quote, this is about foreign policy. And notice again, the broken moral compass, which is this result of this moral subjectivism, that we don't judge, that everyone is the same. Quote, we have the same non-intervention stance on Taiwan as we do with Ukraine. It's none of our business what country they are or are not a part of. And not $1 of taxpayer money should fund, nor one American soldier should fight for either country. Now, we could agree that American soldiers should not go and fight there. But notice, I don't care whether Taiwan is occupied by China. I don't care whether a free country is occupied by a dictatorial empire. I couldn't care less. Here another tweet. The US Treasury doesn't exist to subsidize the military of foreign nations. This includes Israel, Ukraine, and Saudi Arabia. So Israel and Ukraine and Saudi Arabia on the same category? Like, okay, you could say, I don't want my money to go there, but you put them in the same category. Even worse, listen to this. Where is it? Oh, yeah. So what we do, they say, is that we prop Taiwan and Ukraine to stand for themselves, and then, they would otherwise not, and do things that they would otherwise not do. So basically, the only reason Ukrainians are fighting for freedom is because we give them money. And then they give this this quote, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. This is supposedly a founding father quote. Notice, honest friendship with all nations and tangle alliances with none. So all nations, again, are the same. Whether you should be friends with Russia, you should be friends with Saudi Arabia, you should be friends with Iran. And actually, they, if you saw if you check their tweets, there's a tweet the other day from their own poll stream, their own poll, I think, report it's called, where the discussion is why we should go back to discussions with Iran, because this is for peace. If you love peace, and supposedly libertarians love peace, you should go and sit on the table with the Revolutionary Guards and the Supreme Leader and talk it out and figure out your differences. So these people are very triggered by the fact that the United States supports Ukraine, but these are the very same people that can't wait to go back to table with Iran. So here's my point. I would understand someone saying, I cannot stand McCain. He has blood in his hands, horrible foreign policy. But I'd expect that person would be way more angry with Saddam Hussein, with Iran, with Russia, with China. Korea. Yet they're not. So this is why I think the anti-American accusation that was dropped by Rand and by many objectivists, initially I was very skeptical to it. I thought, well, we can be friends. These are good people. After all, they want freedom. I was mistaken. And I was deeply mistaken about, particularly about the so-called paleo-libertarians and anarcho-capitalists. And their bad views turns out it's not a feature. Sorry, it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, and you notice we as objectivists or as students of objectivism, people who agree with Ayn Rand's philosophy and her politics especially, we get especially annoyed at the libertarians because people mistake them for us because they kind of look like us to the untrained eye. And I think that the reason for the libertarians' antipathy towards successful governments like the US, like Israel, like Ukraine, I suppose. I mean, I know these are all corrupt to varying degrees, corrupt democracies, corrupt parliamentary democracies or whatever. But in the global stage, of course, the US and Israel and England and others, similar Western countries, are remarkably successful. And in the context of history, remarkably successful at maintaining the liberty of individuals, maintaining the free way of life. And that annoys libertarians especially. So they tend to be more friendly with dictatorships. They like Putin more than they like Ukraine. They like seeing Donald Trump go and shake hands with North Korea's dictator. You would think these, freedom-loving people they would say, how can you be standing next to Kim Jong-un and not beat him up? You would think they might say. But no, they say, once a dictator has power, be nice to him, shake his hand. We want peace. We love peace, but they're perfectly happy disrupting people's lives here in America. They're perfectly happy seeing Americans harmed because it brings about chaos, which could lead to the anarchy that they so desire. So it's like they especially hate free countries, relatively free countries, because it looks like freedom, right? And like that annoys them. They go, no, freedom is anarchy. We can't have this thing that looks like freedom. People, they think we're us. And that's kind of like how maybe you and I look at libertarians, like, oh, they look like us. Like, let's be very clear that we don't like them. I kind of noticed a little bit of a parallel there, but of course, two very different philosophies at play.
Right. And you mentioned foreign policy. So you mentioned Russia. So someone will say, come on, do you really mean that the libertarians say that Russia is lesser of two evils compared to the United States? That's impossible. Okay, I want you to sit down, dear viewer, because you're gonna be really shocked. Again, I'm not easily shocked, but I was shocked. So here is For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard. Again, I was so much into paleo-libertarianism. I have everything probably that Rothbard has said, and although it's free on the Mises website, I'd also bought them. So we go to page 355, and I'll also show it to you after I read it because you won't believe that this is actually what he says. Quote by Rothbard. So again, which could be a foreign policy that a peace person would look up to? Drum roll, Soviet Union. Here's why. Lenin and his fellow Bolsheviks adopted the theory of, quote, peaceful coexistence as the basic foreign policy for a communist state. the Soviet state, qua state, would devote itself to peaceful relations with all other countries and would not attempt to export communism through interstate warfare. A bit later. Don't worry, it's a short quote. Thus, fortuitously, from a mixture of theoretical and practical grounds of their own, the Soviets arrived early at what libertarians consider to be the only proper and principled foreign policy. The Soviets arrived to what libertarians consider to be the only proper and principled foreign policy. And then later, Stalin and his successors strengthened and reinforced the non-aggressive, peaceful coexistence policy. Here, if you don't believe me, it's here, page 355. So, the Soviets attacking Poland, well, this didn't happen, or if it happened, it was Poland's mistake. Stalin attacking Latvia and Lithuania and Finland, probably he was provoked. Stalin after the Second World War, occupying half of Europe, well, probably it was because of the United States, because here says that Stalin and his successors, so when Khrushchev attacked Hungary and when Brezhnev rolled the tanks in Czechoslovakia, they strengthened and reinforced the non-aggressive, peaceful coexistence policy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And in today, I mean, I consider these libertarians and these anarchists to be part of the new right. Some would say they are sort of the base of to a large degree of the new right, and they are kind of in the business of calling everyone a communist, right? Anyone in the Democrat Party is a communist, right? Anyone who's not anyone who's not one of them is allegedly an apologist for the Soviet Union, and at times Democrats or left-leaning people are uncomfortably close to socialism and apologists for communism. But anarchists, characteristically, have apologized for the Soviet Union and for the Viet Cong, as James Valiant points out in the chat.
Yeah.
There's so much rage at the history of the left, the American left or the Western left, being apologetic for communism. Where's the outrage at libertarians being and anarchists being pro-Soviet Union and pro-Viet Cong and completely apologizing for all of those atrocities? So that I find that very curious.
So to give some context to our friends on what James very rightly said, when the North Vietnam and the Viet Congs entered Saigon, Rothbard was celebrating that this was the defeat of a corrupt state, which was South Vietnam. So he was cheering the rebels.
Oh, it wasn't that he was cheering against America. It was the South Vietnamese.
Yeah. He was also cheering
also the South Vietnamese, according to him, were the worst ones. Yeah. Amazing.
They were the worst ones. Now, Ayn Rand called libertarians the hippies of the right. And again, you could say this is harsh. And yet it isn't harsh, and here's why. Where does this seat posting comes from? It comes from, as you said, this attitude of the new right, which is that nothing in a way is sacred. And of course, McCain shouldn't be sacred, but the idea is that there should be no respect for anything. And by being edgy and by being transgressive for its own sake, then we are basically radicals. I would think that this is exactly the 1960s spirit, which says we're going to provoke, we're going to be the bad kids, but you end up looking like a spoiled 15-year-old and you're without any politics. So in a way, we see the new right copying the playbook of the new left with the transgression and with all that stuff. And this is why you also see the Libertarian Party being all in the culture wars. And what does this mean? You see them jumping in the bandwagon of anti-vaxxers. We see, for example, the Libertarian Party of Georgia, and this is retweeted by the official Libertarian Party account, saying about Fauci that he's about to receive a huge salary for his performance pushing certain pharmaceutical products over the last 2.5 years. So you get the point, right? It's big pharma that's behind what we've seen in the last 2.5 years. And the Libertarian Party of Kentucky calls Fauci a mass murderer. mass murderer. And it gets a retweet by the official account. And if you go to the Mises Caucus Twitter account, there you see even more anti-vax tweets. So again, this is the moral relativism. This is the idea that, we don't need reason, we just need liberty. And we hate the regime so much that whatever comes from this regime, we are against it. And by the way, this is tribalism. I hate someone a lot, so whatever they are for, I am against. The regime is pushing the vaccines, therefore I'm against the vaccines. And one last point, Rucka, before I throw the ball back to you. This also, sooner rather than later, also leads to anti-capitalist messages. So this is the war of the new right against, quote, big business. So this is what Dave Smith tweeted some days ago. I'm against student loan forgiveness, blah, 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 blah. But, continue quote, every damn billionaire in this country is on welfare. The last 2+ years have seen the largest corporate giveaways in human history, and it doesn't seem to generate as much outrage. So again, big business is getting, how did this happen? How was this a transfer of money to big business? So big business is with the regime, therefore we are anti-big business. Again, libertarians, you sound a lot like my 16-year-old leftist self, and it's quite pathetic. So the axis is your politics are wrong and they're pathetic, to your politics are distasteful, horrible, and again, dog whistling to anti-Semites, unless there's a joke there that I missed.
I mean, yeah, dog whistling is would be a step in the a good direction compared to what they're doing. So blaming corporations and blaming banks is it's characteristic of a lot of these people. So ever since I read Atlas Shrugged, it's just been so clear to me. And this was in my teen years. I read Atlas Shrugged, and it's clear. Yes, corporations and cronies, they are major offenders in this lobby system that we have. But the way out of this is to dismantle the lobby system and to have capitalism, to have the government do only its proper job, which is protecting property rights and, your person. And until then, blaming the companies and blaming the banks, it's short-sighted. Sure, plenty of them are guilty of getting welfare and getting subsidies and getting favoritism. But again, they did not design the system. A businessman never had the power to craft this lobby system. The voters basically do. The intellectuals and they influence the culture, and the culture, the people, they vote themselves into a lobby system because they want favors and they want to help the poor and they want whatever it is they want that is outside the proper purview of government. So it blows my mind that people who have read Ayn Rand, they've read Atlas Shrugged, some of them have read everything that Rand has ever written and heard everything she said, and many of them have just a deep knowledge of free market economics and all of that. That even with all of that knowledge, they still just want to sit there and point the finger at companies and point the finger at bankers, right? These New York bankers, wink, wink. The 6 million, all 6 million of them. They still just can't be pro-capitalism. They can't just say, yeah, this is a mess and the way out of this is capitalism. And yeah, on the way there, we can cut subsidies and we can point the blame at businessmen who are willingly part of this BS. But the goal here is to get the government do its proper job. But that's apparently a bridge too far for them mentally, as well as just sort of in terms of what they actually want. They don't actually want a government that does its job. They don't actually want a proper government. They want anarchy, or they don't know what they want. And about as far as shit posting, by the way, look, I like over the top, outlandish humor, and this is actually kind of awkward because just last night, Dave Smith on his podcast, him and his friends were laughing at one of my hits from 10 years ago. They thought it was very funny, so it's kind of a funny timing, But I mean, there's comedy, there's entertainment, and then there's what are adults actually doing? To have a political party post, Holocaust dog whistles, and to have a president who you never know when he's being serious or not, referring to Trump, and to have this whole political movement, the new right, which is rife with Holocaust deniers or just various creepy racists who are always falling back on, oh no, we're just shit posting, or we're just, trying to piss off the left. So you can't, don't take what we say seriously. We're just being provocative to own the libs. Do you really want to live in the world where no one knows who's serious and where just everything's a constant shit post, where there's no time to just kind of step off the stage and just take off your makeup and just kind of be a person and just be very clear? Here's what I believe. Here's what you believe. Let's debate. Let's have a government with a very clear, a doctrine, and we can go through a very rational and calm, sober medium in order to address the problems in the world. They just want to live in complete chaos 24/7 and in every corner of the world. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me. Should we read some super chats, or did you want to
read super chats, and then we'll say goodbye with the worst of all tweets, because I haven't gotten to the worst tweet.
Oh no. Okay. Roland with 199 euros says, this is to help defeat the libertarians. Let me try to read that again. This is to help defeat the libertarians. Like you thought he was going to say the left, but libertarians. Marilyn with $4. Thank you. Kirk with $5 says, but the libertarians agree with objectivists on like 90% of political issues. Why can't we just all get along? What are you, on the left? I know, right? Jonathan with $4.99. Oh, he just couldn't give us $5. Like, can't you be more like Kirk over here? No, I'm kidding. All right. Jonathan says, highly recommend Peter Schwartz's Libertarianism, the perversion of liberty, on these hedonistic fools. Yeah. And
it's
someone
on,
could be...
it's on the Voice of Reason for and if you have also what's the older version, the objectivist activist or something, so it has the full version, the intellectual activist. If you want the shortened version, it's on the Voice of Reason.
If you're interested in why objectivism is not libertarianism and why anarchists are not fellow travelers of objectivists, the resources are out there. But you need to be interested. You need to be selfish. You need to want to know. You can't, you can't, we can't convince you to care. James Valiant with $10 says, go Nikos. And then Ian with $5 says, the HBA show, The Anarchist, is an excellent illustration of what is wrong with these kinds of people. Have you heard of this? Is this fiction, or is this a documentary?
I've heard about it, but I don't remember how or when. Also, I'm not a subscriber to HBO, but and I think it also has a mention in Ayn Rand. Oh, I remember. I saw it in the Slack channel of ARI, where any mention on Ayn Rand is kind of brought up. So I think that's where I saw it. But I haven't watched it, so I have no opinion.
Mm-hmm. So Francis has become a member. Welcome, and thank you, Francis, for your support. And those are all the super chats. All right.
Okay. Last tweet.
Let's hear it.
So this is a random person, but it was retweeted by the Libertarian Party, Mises Caucus. So the person asks, to be clear, you think the Taliban are less tyrannical and less evil than the United States? So we have Taliban in the United States. Let's see who is worse. And the reply by our libertarian, quote, the Taliban are encircling the planet with hundreds of military bases, using their military and economic might to bully the world into obedience, working to destroy any nation which disobeys them, and killing people by the millions in wars of aggression. Only the US empire is. So again, in the broken moral compass of the libertarians, it means the Taliban are less evil than the United States. So again, notice this is not a criticism of a bad foreign policy where we are the first to shout from the rooftops that this is a bad foreign policy for different reasons than the libertarians have. This is saying that, I'm so clueless on issues of morality that I cannot even recognize the evil of the Taliban compared to the evil of the United States or whatever.
Yeah, if you look up objectivist lectures and books from the 2000s, you see a lot on foreign policy for obvious reasons, because it was the decade of 9/11 and of America's Iraq war. And sadly, the world did not hear the message. The world is basically the anti-war movement sort of won the public discourse. And now you have Republicans and Democrats alike. And the Republicans are more vocal about it, just dropping all context. So anytime the military bombs anything, it's the same as Hitler rounding up people on ethnic criteria and gassing them to death. So like just dropping context completely. But if these people actually thought the US government is worse than the Taliban, why would they opt to live under the US government, right? Wouldn't they want to get as far away? So the first question to ask in any war is, what is each side fighting for? And I know they'll say, oh, the US is fighting for oil. Okay, but what's the way of life that America is fighting to preserve to the extent that they are? Versus what is the way of life that the Taliban are imposing on their subjects? So that, I think, is the first question. And then it becomes a lot clearer to see, to assess any conflict, Israel versus Hamas. None of these anarchists would want to live under Hamas. All of them would opt to live under Israeli rule. So they know their feet are voting. Their actions are showing which they consider to be more or less evil. So yeah, it's absolutely childish, but unfortunately it's prevalent, and it's not going to, again, people, they need to be hungry for the truth in order to correct this error. For now, most people are going to continue seeing Hitler and Barack Obama as the same, because both have, both are responsible for deaths. I will say this, the light at the end of the tunnel always is, as bad as things are, the positive, it could get worse. That's a pretty optimistic, that's a positive way to look at it. But even more positive is the way out of this is, with positivity, with positive values, people being inspired by beautiful art, people being selfish in their career aspirations and their romantic, hopes, and people wanting a good life for themselves. When that's in vogue, they're not going to be inspired to be gross anarchists. They're not going to be inspired by the woke left. They're not going to be inspired by any sort of tribalism, any movement that tells you that your personal values are not what's important. So when people are hungry for a good life, the movements or the philosophies that are offering them the tools to attain that is shrinking by the day. And I think we do see a much higher number of people today interested in Ayn Rand than ever before, and it's growing, and it's going to continue growing. And intellectuals like yourself are being trained to teach more. And and history shows a small handful of people could make a huge difference. Look at the United States. Look at the small handful of people who changed the world forever. So let's focus on the positive, and don't give the evil people a second more thought than it takes to defeat them, as I'm paraphrasing Ayn Rand, I think. All right. On that Oscar-winning speech.
So maybe we should say goodbye.
Let me read the announcements. We've got coming up today at 10 p.m. UK time. It's The Cutting Edge with Lee Pearson and special guest Robin Mockett on Is Anti-Aging Research Coming of Age? That would be nice. I'm 35. I'm ready for some to reverse my aging. What do you say? You want to age a little bit more?
Go for it.
You seem to be aging backwards.
Let's live till 300 at least, and let's read how many episodes would that be. Anyway, I'm not good in maths, but we'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective. Thank you, Nikos, and
Thank
goodbye.
you, Rucka.